What factions of each game line are best for cross-splat play, in your opinion? Now, one of the things that really hits me as far as factions that work between each other, mages, yes, they can work with any splat type. Seers definitely would work with any splat type just because they feel like they should be in control of everything, or reality in a way. Mage is a lot more difficult to justify in some respects, just because anytime Mage gets involved, it suddenly becomes a Mage game because of how powerful they can be and how all-encompassing their stories can be. Ordo Dracul and Carthians would probably be most likely to work with other factions. Seven would definitely work with hunters in hunting down vampires. Werewolf the Forsaken. You have the Iron Masters, who are more modern. Like, any faction that has a link to being more modern or more tied to humanity is probably going to be able to work with other factions of a similar type a lot better than, say, something like the Invictus or the Blood Talons. Of course, you have the Free Councils probably going to work with a lot of other different types of factions a lot better than, say, Guardians of the Veil or Silver Ladder. Seers would probably work with everyone just because they want to control everyone. Then we have Promethean, which Prometheans are very difficult to work with because of the disquiet they cause amongst other people that causes them to fear, hate, or even fall in love with them, to an extent that there is a lot of fighting and causes some destruction. So Prometheans might not be part of a faction, but they definitely might work with other people. The Prometheans that use Flux, who I forget their name, they would be difficult to work with. Changeling the Lost, any of the Changeling courts would likely work with other groups pretty easily. Loyalist Changelings, on the other hand, or Privateers, might work with other groups just so that they can bring back more Changelings to Arcadia. After that, there's Geist. Sin Eaters would definitely work with any faction that they could, regardless, probably. The Reapers are about bringing ghosts back into the afterlife, so yes, they might work with other people, but only if it coincides with that goal. Mummy the Curse. Mummy cults would definitely work with other people. Mummy definitely have their goals are usually tied to their judge, and unless there's something that the goal of the faction that they're working with isn't in line with their judge's purview, or is specifically directly opposed, such as if there's a faction that is all about desecrating religious sites, that probably won't be a faction that defends religious sites would want to be part of. Demons would work with anyone, honestly. I feel they're espionage and they can pretend to be other splat types or be humans who are familiar with the supernatural. Beast is, even if Beast is a little controversial, it still works with most splat types, except for Demon, because demons are other, but that doesn't mean you can't work for them. Similarly, like, Demon and Beast don't have factions in the same way. Like, Angels are the God Machine faction, but demons have agencies they work with that are very specific to the type of agency you're a part of. There are agencies who help equip people with weapons, and then there's agencies who are weapons and covers, and then there's agencies who are against the God Machine. The God Machine demons aren't going to... The demons that are against the God Machine who want to fight it might not ally with other splats, but it honestly, if their goals align, they're going to work together. Beast works, they don't have a faction, really. The heroes could work really well with hunters, because hunters typically hunt entities, and if a hero's hunting a beast, the hunters might join in. And then lastly, we have Deviant, which Deviant is a custom game line where you can make your own character look like however it wants, and is very open-ended in character creation. So they could work with anyone, basically. Now, people do say that the whole thing of a deviant being attached to a conspiracy means that if they're not doing things actively against their conspiracy, they are a lot weaker and will eventually die, possibly. I'm not of that idea, mainly because I think if you have a conviction touchstone, a loyalty touchstone or a conviction touchstone, conspiracies would definitely work with any enemy faction. Hunter would work with any enemy faction. Any is going to fight supernaturals. I do like the concept that good hunters will only hunt supernaturals that are doing stuff bad against other humans. If there's a rogue vampire leaving bodies, that's when the hunters come in. What are some more details on how to run multi-splat games? Every splat starts with the same number of stats except for Mummy. Theoretically, if everyone starts at the base level, they are pretty much on par with one another. Now, there are some abilities that other splats get that are more potent than other splats. The big one for me is that any information gathering ability, such as Vision's Importance, I think, from Changeling the Lost, or that ability in Werewolf the Forsaken where you awaken a spirit and ask the spirit questions, or Auspex for vampires. Those abilities are very limited for those splats, but Mage, as soon as you have 1 dot in an Arcana, you have access to those types of spells. Information gathering spells are very versatile for mages, so they can literally figure out anything. Typically can be a problem. I played as a level 1 mage in Chronicles of Darkness in a multi-splat game, and it was perfectly fine for me. I was causing paradox left and right. I was taking it in and damaging myself because I didn't want to release it into the air. Meanwhile, my other mage players were like, oh, I'm doing this thing, which means I'm not provoking paradox. And I'm like, how are you not provoking paradox, but I am? Mage can be a problem. Mummy, even if mummies get really powerful, have the mummy have one job. And sometimes if you need to limit abilities your players have access to, I'm all for it. For instance, when I played Mummy, me and another player who also played a Mummy both chose the same 2 abilities, the same 2 utterances, which were Rebuke the Vizier and the Blessings of the God King. Blessings of the God King is very overpowered. You become an avatar of your judge and you basically are impossible to kill. And Rebuke the Vizier stops all supernatural abilities from being active unless they only affect the self. And that meant that the mages we were going up against couldn't do anything, and we were just sort of like slapping them across the room and killing them. But same thing with Demon. Demon has Merciless Gunman and the Word and Hellfire rounds, which can be very potent. That being said, like, Changelings, vampires do have some abilities that are kind of kooky, but the thing is you have to realize there are some downsides to these abilities. But if they can become too powerful and everyone's taking them, just tell your players that you'll reimburse them, but that ability has become far too overused. What are some good crossover plot hooks for campaigns? So for instance, if you have like vampires, werewolves, everything working together, what could bring them all together? Well, there is the Contagion Chronicle, which I haven't really covered on this channel, but it is a God Machine related meta plot, for lack of a better term, that talks about like how these groups will interact with each other to face a super threat that is the God Machine, or something that's affecting the God Machine. I haven't gotten into it very much. The politics of the interactions between the various factions is always a good one. Werewolves and vampires, classic. Cults interacting with each other. Territorial disputes across multiple splat types is always fun. I have an entire list of plot hooks that I'll put over here somewhere or in the link down below. It's over 1,000 plot hooks I generated or I compiled from the Onyx Path forums, as well as some I've written myself. They're only like 1 or 2 sentences long. Some of them are a little bit longer, but basically they're a good jumping off point for someone who wants to do crossover plot hooks. And there is a tag for specifically crossover plot hooks, so that you're not just limited to vampire ones or werewolf ones, etc. Once the Patreon reaches $30, Awkward GM Corbin will run a Vampire the Requiem actual play one-shot. Do all the Gameline factions interact with each other? Depends on the storyteller. If you want the werewolves and vampires to all be in the same location or same city that you've chosen, go for it. No one's stopping you from doing that. A lot of game lines presume that there's just one faction you have to worry about, and they'll have sidebars that talk about how they interact with other factions. In my opinion, the game line factions probably have some little bit of crossover. For instance, in Vampire the Requiem, there is a bloodline of gangrels that are more spirit focused and work well with being in a werewolf pack. There are changelings who can look like wolves that might do well in a werewolf pack. There's, of course, Mage has the Thyrsus spirit mage that would work well in werewolf packs. Really, as long as the factions have like similar goals, working together is probably in their best interests. Though, having said this, I don't like the idea that every faction knows all the information about the other factions, because disinformation is something that is pretty potent and probably used by a lot of groups to avoid being known quantities. I don't know, like it can be pretty tough, especially with the mages, because as soon as like a vampire is next to a mage, the mage is like, oh, I read his mind and I see everything about the Camarilla, and now or not Camarilla, but the Princedom and everything, and now I know all about vampires. I know about the Order Dracul, I know about the Carthians, I know about the Invictus, and I know all the different clan types and things like that, and I write a book and I put it out. That's not how I like my games to go down. I don't like, there is the thing about the internet era where we have everything at our little tips of our thumbs, where we can look up, like, if I wanted to know who the first emperor of Japan was or the first emperor of China, I can look that up pretty easily. That's not something I like to give access to for the factions in the different game lines. I just kind of like the masquerade, and having everything be a known quantity means the masquerade doesn't exist. Shout out to our patrons for supporting the channel.